Let's get started. Introduction of Dying Colonialism by Frantz Fanon. This is about the Algerian struggle during his time. Introduction. Revolution is mankind's way to life today, of life today. This is the age of revolution, the age of indifference. It's gone forever. But the latter age paved the way for today for the great masses of mankind, while still suffering the greatest oppression and the greatest affronts to their dignity as human beings, never ceased to resist, to fight as well as they could, to live in combat. The combatant dignity of humanity was maintained in an unbreakable, though not always visible line, in the depths of the life of the masses and in the uninterrupted fight, slandered, attacked, but alive in the very center of history, of little revolutionary vanguards bound to this profound human reality and to its socialist features, and not to the apparent omnipotence. Omnipotence, right? Of great systems. Today, the great system have died or are living in a state of crisis, and it is no longer the age of little vanguards. The whole of humanity has erupted violently, tumultuously, right? Yeah. Into the stage of history, taking its own destiny in its hands. Capitalism is under siege, surrounded by the global tide of revolution. And this revolution, still without a center, without a precise form, has its own laws, its own life and depth of unity accorded it by the same masses who created it, who live it, who inspire each other from across boundaries, give each other spirit and encouragement, and learn from their collective experiences. This revolution is changing humanity. In the revolutionary struggle, the immense oppressed masses of the colonies and semi-colonies feel that they are a part of life for the first time. Life acquires a sense of transcendence, an object to end exploitation, to govern themselves by and for themselves, to construct a way of life. The armed struggle breaks up the old routine of life, of the countryside, the villages, exalts, and opens wide the doors of the future. Liberation does not come as a gift from anybody. It is seized by the masses and with their own hands. And by seizing it, they themselves are transformed. Confidence in their own strength soars, and they turn their energy and their experience to the task of building, governing, and deciding their own lives for themselves. This is the climate in which the immense majority of mankind lives today, in one way or another. Algeria has been and continues to be on the greatest landmark of this global battle, and Frantz Fanon's book bears witness of Algerians' role. The book continues to have for the reader years afterwards the same freshness it had at the time it was written, because Fanon's main preoccupation was not to document the facts of exploitation, nor the suffering of the people, nor the brutality of the imperialist oppressors. All this is demonstrated in passing, but his main interest has been to go to the essentials, the spirit of struggle, of opposition, and initiatives of the Algerian masses. Their infinite, multiform, interminable resistance, their daily heroism, their capacity to learn in weeks and days and minutes all that it was necessary for the struggle for liberation, their capacity and decisions to make all the sacrifices of all the efforts, among which the greatest was not giving one's life in combat, perhaps by changing one's daily life, one's routine, prejudices, and immoral customs, insofar as these were a hindrance up to the revolutionary struggle. Frantz Fanon died at 37 in December 1961, days before the appearance of the first edition of Les Damasci de la Rhétorique. He was not a Marxist, but he was approaching Marxism through the same essential door, which for many Marxists, officials, and diplomats is closed with 7 keys. His concerns with what the masses do and say and think, and his belief that it is the masses and not the leaders nor systems who in the final analysis make the determined history. This is the dominant line of all Marxist analysis of historical events. Rather, in his articles on revolution or counter-revolution in Spain, or in his moving pages on the centuries-old struggle of the Sicilian people, a struggle which has forged the character, the pride, and the silence of Sicily, and which is the root of its present and its future. The masses resist and fight in 1,000 ways, not only with arms in hand. These means include violence, because in the world where oppression is maintained by violence from above, it is only possible to liquidate it with violence from below. Ultimately, once the struggle reaches a certain point, arms in hand are indispensable. On November 1st, 1954, a small group of Algerian leaders launched an armed struggle, breaking with all whole patterns of negotiation and procrastination established by the older leaders. In a very short time, they had the entire population behind them. The decision to make arms did not spring full-blown from the heads of this handful of leaders. They simply interpreted what was already there in the population as a whole, and the people in turn were influenced by revolution in the rest of the world. In 1949, China tipped decisively and definitely the balance of world power in favor of revolution. In 1951, she risked her own existence to send hundreds of thousands of volunteers to support the Korean Revolution. In 1954, Dien Bien Phu was culminating, right? Disaster marked the end of French domination in Indochina. This was the signal for Algeria to launch her struggle. And in 1960 to 1961, the defeat of French imperialism in Algeria unleashed a great tide of African revolution. The revolutionaries in Zanzibar took advantage of this uninterrupted chain of revolutionary struggles to realize one of the greatest deeds of the epic. Storming the center of power with a small nucleus, they expelled imperialism from a backward country with only 300,000 inhabitants. They took the road of socialist revolution, arms in hand, with no other support than the determination of the masses of Zanzibar, barefoot, poor, illiterate, armed as well as they could manage, and their own revolutionary courage. Algeria was prepared by the incessant waves of revolution that inundated the world from 1943 onward, and in its turn opened the gates in Zanzibar to the Congo, Mali, Portuguese Guinea. The Algerian Revolution shares with the revolutions that precede it, and with those that are continuing it, certain essential features which can be summed up in the words mass participation. The women, the family, the children, the aged, everybody participated. The double oppression, social and sexual, of the women cracks, and is finally shattered, and its essential nature as the social oppression of the family as a whole is revealed. It is simply that its weakest part, the children, the elderly, the women, must bear the most exaggerated forms of oppression. But in the revolutionary struggle, the relative weakness, the apparent defenselessness of these groups disappear. What was formerly a disadvantage becomes an advantage for the revolution. The old men or women who walk with halting steps past the military patrol, the timid women hiding behind their veil, the innocent-faced children do not seem to the enemy to be dangers or threats. So they can pass arms, information, medicines. They can prepare surprise attacks, serve as guides and sentries. They can even take up arms themselves, even sort of cunning. It is a legitimate weapon to use against the enemy. And the embattled population is not composed solely of men, but also of women, children, and old people. This is true not only in Algeria or in armed struggle. The decision of men never comes alone. It is never isolated. It is supported by the decision of the whole family, the whole population united for their common objective. Then the striking workers occupies the factories or makes a decision in the union meetings to stick to the struggle against all odds. It is not he alone who decides. Behind him are his wife, his children, his parents, his entire family supporting him, intervening and deciding with him. This is what happens in Bolivia in the great miner strikes. It happened in Argentina in the general strikes. It happened in the great struggles of North American proletariat, as reflected, for example, in the film, The Salt of the Earth. It is in this kind of struggle that women stand firm in her own strength, throws all the energy she has accumulated during the centuries of oppression, her infinite capacity to resist, her courage. It is in this kind of struggle that family relations change and women prepares for her role in society that is being built. She also prepares for it in battle. This is what Fanon describes, and what he describes is no different from what the Chinese and the Cuban women did. The Algerian women who carries arms or who participates directly in combat is like the wife of the Bolivian miner who takes up arms to defend the occupied mines, or who keeps watch, gun in hand and dynamite at her waist, over the hostages taken by the miners to be exchanged for the liberty of their own imprisoned leaders. She is like the Guatemalan peasant woman who diverts the attention of the army at the cost of her own life to cover and retreat of a guerrilla patrol in which her son, her husband, or simply her neighbor is marching. This is the kind of life that is being lived and the kind of revolution that humanity is passing through today. And Fanon shows how after it is over, the place of women can never again be the same as it was before. Women, like the proletariat, can only liberate themselves by liberating all other oppressed stratas and sectors of the society, and by acting together with them. To describe a revolution, one doesn't have to describe armed action. They are inevitable. But what defines and decides any revolution is the social struggle of the masses supported by armed action. Fanon shows that this was the Algerian way. The guerrillas in the mountains, the army of liberation, did not defeat the French army militarily. It was the whole population, supported by the guerrilla army, which defeated and destroyed the imperialist enemy as a social force. For each Algerian soldier who died, says Fanon, 10 civilians died. This indicates the mass character of the struggle, but it also indicates the complete impotence of an army of modern weapons and of all the tactics of powerful nations. Then it comes to defeating an embattled people with infinite initiatives, with finite initiatives and exhaustible heroism, at peoples capable and consistent surprises of erroneous tenacity. All mass struggle develops these features. The armed combatants, the guerrilla fighters, are only centers of support, of encouragement, of organization for this mass movement that reaches into every nook and cranny of the population. For this reason, the power of each guerrilla fighter does not rest simply in himself, his weapon, and his army unit. He is incarnation of the will of the people to struggle, of the resistance, of the anonymous and innumerable ways in which the people seek to harass and liquidate the oppressor and refuse to collaborate with him. This is the only magic the guerrillas have, that they are the representatives of the social force, immensely superior to their own numbers and firepower, a social force that constantly encircles, attacks, and intimidates the enemy. The capitalist and imperialist armies can go on dozens of mopping up operations and even achieve some relative success, militarily speaking. But after the guerrillas have taken root to a certain point, they can no longer be liquidated, for the guerrillas have already become a way of life for the population, a part of its existence, and they will be renewed, reborn, and will go forward, whatever the situation or the apparent power of the enemy. The French army announced time after time the, quote, final offensive, and, quote, the last quarter hour. It was ruined, defeated, as before it had been defeated in Indochina. It wasn't simply that the guerrilla arms that routed the French, but the constant action and the constant struggle of the entire population who fought them, even to the point of listening to the radio and reinventing the news, as the Guatemalan and the Colombian peasants do today. From the radio, for the radio is an instrument of mass struggle. The counter-revolutionary forces believe they have discovered this also, and they use, quote, the violence of America in Latin America as yesterday, quote, to Radio Algeria was used in Algeria, but the radio is an instrument of struggle only when what it says corresponds with what the masses feel and want. Then they accept it, take it, rely on it to further their cause. And when they cannot hear what it says, why they invent what it says, to the greater glory of the revolution. In contrast, the counter-revolutionary radio is not listening to its voice. It's lost in a complete vacuum. The Algerian people accept the radio when it ceased to be an instrument of the enemy and was useful for the revolution. In the same way, the Cuban people accepted literacy and achieved in a year when this became a goal of the revolution, when they saw it was tied to their own concrete interests and not to those of capitalist governments. The transistor radio has been transformed into a revolutionary implement as powerful as the gun. In the mountains of Guatemala and Colombia, the peasant listened to the Radio Havana or Radio Peking and lived the life of the world revolution. In Bolivia, the miners have more than transistor radios. The principal mine worker unions have their own radio transmitters, and the miners' radios are one of the greatest instruments of progress of Bolivia. When there is an attempt on the part of the press and the official radio to hide the fact of the miners' strike by not reporting it, the miners' radio inform all of Bolivia and beyond, for they are shortwave transmitters that can be heard as far away as Peru and Uruguay. When the armies tries to isolate one mining district from another, the miners' radio communicate with each other and unite the different union locals via the radio, and union members at one mind discussed agreements and situations with those at another. Via the radio, union propaganda is disseminated, as well as the programs of discussions adopted of decisions. Oh, is that decisions? Yeah, it's this decision. Discussions. I always mess decisions and discussions up. Adopted at the meeting.
Decisions.
Decisions adopted at the meetings, call to action, and proclamations. Via the radios, the mine workers militia is called together, or the advances of the army are announced. Via the radio came the announcements of the defeat of the Bolivian army at the hands of the mine workers militia in Sora at the end of 1964. And because the miners have radio transmitters, the peasants acquire transistor radios in order to listen to them. As in Algeria, the Bolivian miners defend their radio transmitters as part of their collective existence. Many unions have brought their transmitters with voluntary contributions of a day's, 2 days, and even 3 days wages per month from all the workers in the mine. The Bolivian miner earned $20 to $40 per month. One must consider his standard of living in order to understand what it means for him to give up a day's or 2 days wages each month so that the union can get its radio. But then the collective pride, quote, our union has a radio too, end quote. When the government or the police have wished to silence or take by assault such a radio, officially they were prohibited in the government, having declared them illegal. But in the mining districts, the union and not the government commands. The response has been explosive. In the Hananiai, can't say it, the miners took back the radio by mobilizing their militia, and in retaliation, they took over the municipal radio of the district as well, which from then on was controlled by the miners. Though they didn't know it, Bolivian miners and Algerian masses were united in a single action for a single end. In this way, and not through books, business deals, or international assemblies, is the present unity of humanity being forged and constructed. Frantz Fanon tells how modern medical techniques, when they were brought in by imperialism, were resisted and rejected by the Algerian population. Ignorant, obstinate, backward. According to the cultured imperialists who were baffled by this rejection. But these same techniques were accepted with dizzying haste when the revolution adopted them. Culture, like truth, is concrete. And for the masses, the most elevated form of culture is to say, of progress is to resist imperialist domination and penetration. Although this might come wrapped up in valid forms of culture or civilization, the Algerian kept their women behind veils, rejected the doctors, would not accept the radio, but they were not backward. In their way, they were defending civilization as well as they were able. Civilization for them meant first of all to resist imperialism, and second, to cast it into the sea at whatever cost. And they were right. One morning, from the home of a Bolivian miner who was giving me lodging, a home measuring 2 meters by 3, the walls and floors of which were of earth, and which housed his wife and children as well. I saw that there was an ambulance at the corner from the Inter-American Health Service. It was giving free vaccinations against smallpox. I asked my host why she didn't send his son to be vaccinated, and he answered, quote, Are you wild? Who knows what kind of filth these gringos are injecting in order to turn us Bolivians into unintelligent people so they can exploit us better? Thus are the alliances of progress received. Basically, the miner was right, where in his way he was defending something that was much more important to him than a vaccination. But the revolution triumphs, and everything charges. A devouring thirst for knowledge invades the entire population, whether in the new nation or in the liberated territories of a nation in revolt. And because of this, Fanon states, quote, the people who take their destiny into their own hands assimilate the most modern forms of technology at the extraordinary rate, end quote. as in China, in Cuba, in Korea, and with all of the oppressed peoples of Latin America, of Asia, and Africa. The revolution is civilization. And also in Portugal, in Spain, and Greece, and in the south of Italy and beyond. This book of Fanon covers a particularly crucial period in the Algerian Revolution. It was during the first 5 years when the people were fighting virtually alone, almost without outside help, that the people decided once and for all to stand firm and lay the foundation of their triumph. Algeria was never completely alone. She had the support of the masses of the Arab countries, who secured the support of their governments, many of which had been dragging their feet on the issue. She had the support of the peoples of the world, who followed her fight ever closely. But she was alone in material means, in material support. She had no support from the USSR, and support from China came only in 1959. And in the first years, she had to break, by means of her own heroism, the wall of silence and slander. And that, the hell? Oh my gosh, this one's okay. that was being erected not only by the enemy, but also by those who later declared themselves to be Algerian friends. People never forgot the past, or what the past teaches. That is of importance for the future. The Algerian people have not forgotten that the French Communist Party, at the beginning of the armed revolution in Algeria, denounced it as a nationalist and reactionary. And for a long time, the party maintained this position and kept aloof, while continuing to insist that the Algerian was part of France. Neither have the people forgotten that the Algerian Communist Party followed the line of the French party, although many individual communists cast their lot with the revolution. Nor have they forgotten those who, during this period, gave lip service to the revolution while the practice supported Massia Hadij, an instrument of French imperialism, who called himself a socialist, in order to combat the revolutionary mass movement from within Algeria itself. People haven't forgotten any of this because they are practical, and they scorn forever those who, out of selfishness or criminal blindness, fought the liberation movement, denounced it, or betrayed it, meanwhile calling themselves, quote, revolutionaries or communists or socialists. Such people, once the collective experience of the masses is accomplished, they are never again influential, no matter what money or means they may have at their disposal. But just as they have not forgotten this, the Algerian people have not forgotten either that the sympathies of the masses of the world was embodied in hundreds of thousands of men of flesh and bones who went beyond or ignored the pacifist politics of the French Communist Party and the diplomatic consideration that kept Khrushchev from giving arms to Algeria, fuck Khrushchev, and made him appear instead to be friendly with French government in open imperialist warfare against the Algerian people. As Fanon points out, these hundreds of thousands in France and in Algeria itself supported Algeria without being Algerians, participated in her struggle, and risked their lives for the Algerian Revolution. These men were not only French or Arabs, or Arabic people, I think, right? I can say Arabic people on that part, right?
No, it's Arabs.
Okay. They were also Spaniards, Italians, Greeks that entered Mediterranean support in Algeria in arms. And from beyond came Englishmen, Dutchmen, Belgians, Germans, Latin Americans. Like every great revolution, the Algerian Revolution attracted men from all over the world and received them as its own. Those who went not only made their contribution to the struggle of that moment, but by the simple fact that their presence in the struggle for liberation helped to model the future image of Algeria that is being built today. to move her in the direction of international socialism as an individual or as a group that symbolizes concretely the will to support the revolution of much broader groups who could find no way to participate directly. An important feature of Fanon's book is that he doesn't dwell on the torture, the pain, and the suffering of the Algerian people. Rather, he emphasizes their life and inner strength. Certainly, he tells about torturers, but he doesn't stop there. And above all, he doesn't want to arouse compassion for the Algerian people by confidence in their strength. In this, he disassociated himself from numerous defenders of the revolution in Algeria or elsewhere who assumed a protective and compassionate tone and invited us to take pity on an embattled people and to cease the atrocities. This was the characteristics of a good many European quote unquote friends of the Algerian Revolution, and as it is today of many friends of the Vietnamese Revolution. They approached the Algerians with a terrible paternalistic air to sympathize with their suffering. In any struggling people, this kind of help arouses the immediate and instinctive rejection because they feel that it is the pacifist form of the old colonialism, and they feel that it damages the innermost source of their fighting power, their faith in their own strength, their confidence in their ultimate superiority over the imperialist enemy. The Algerians rejected all paternalistic defenders, as the Vietnamese rejected them today. The images of destruction, of death, or of horror inspire aversions in the combatant because he doesn't confront them with pity. But, I gotta read this, but with the gun in hand, quote, instead of pitting us and being horrified by the atrocities of imperialism, better fight against it in our own country as we do in ours, said the Algerians, and say other colonial peoples today to their new pacifist protectors. Quote, that is the best way to help us and to put an end to the atrocities. The essence of revolution is not the struggle for bread. It is the struggle for human dignity. Certainly this includes bread. And at the base of any revolutionary situation are economic conditions. But beyond a certain point of development, on this same basis, it is more important for a people to have guns in hand than to eat more than the year before. This is demonstrated by all revolutions, and to the degree that the boundaries of the revolution are extended and become one with those of the globe itself. Immediate, right? Immediate? I always fuck up. The immediate economic conditions are secondary to the movement of the masses to liquidate all forms of oppression and govern themselves by and for themselves. As a result of this desire for liberation and human dignity, the dominating feature of humanity today, today people accept and assume the material sacrifices of years which any revolution requires, because they feel that thus they live a new life, a better life, and that for the first time they are really living their own lives. Quote, colonized person who in this respect is like the men in underdeveloped countries or the disinherited in all parts of the world, perceives life not as a flowering or a development of an essential productiveness, but as a permanent struggle against an omnipresent death. This menacing death is experienced as endemic, famine, unemployment, and high mortality rate, an inferiority complex, and the absence of any hope for the future, says Frantz Fanon. The revolution ends all that. The source of human dignity. It is preparing humanity through its transformation in the revolution for the construction of socialism. Without this transformation, there will be no material base for the building of socialism. I say material advisedly, since it is not only the means of production which are material, but also the accumulated experiences in the hands and hearts and hands of men. Oh, heads, sorry. For this reason, Fanon closes his book with these words, quote, "The revolution is in depth the true one, precisely because it changes man and renews society, has reached an advanced stage. This oxygen which creates the shape, a new humanity, this too is the Algerian Revolution. And it is also, one must add today, the socialist revolution which is advancing in Algeria. And the revolution changes a people in this way, if it is capable of illuminating and influencing Europe and Africa, as it has been doing. This is because it is a part of the global process which now knows no boundaries. If, as an example, the Algerians were able to cast out French imperialism, it was not only by the heroism of their struggle, but also because, in one way or another, and despite the reformist character of their officials in instructions, French workers continued to resist French capitalism, to threaten it, to undermine it from within. They didn't have the means to do more, but without their presence, French imperialism would have felt strong enough to resist the Algerian for a longer time. At the same time, the Algerian victory demonstrated how a revolution can stand firm and triumph without a great deal of outside support, securing or even making its own weapons, if it is capable of uniting the masses of the country in the struggle for liberation. There is no doubt that Algeria, like every revolutionary process in the world, has made its powerful influence felt even inside the Soviet Union. The Soviet people know that it was only at the last minute that their government lent its support to Algeria. Today they have drawn their conclusions, and one of them is that Khrushchev is no more. Other conclusions will come later. They are slowly ripening inside the Soviet Union, for it is certainly obvious that if an Algerian, the masses, had and have the inner life of their own that Fanon describes, the same life with the same aims exists in the Soviet Union, although it is expressed in a different form. And just as the Algerian is united with the Cuban, the Bolivian, and the Congolese through certain obvious acts carried out in common, he is also united with the Soviet Union and the Chinese citizens. The immediate, it's not immediate, isn't it? Hello? Immediate? Hello? Anybody there? Guess not. I'll go look it up. Am I here? Am I frozen?
Yeah, you're here.
Okay, cool. I gotta figure out this word.
I'm just busy right now. I apologize.
Okay, I just gotta figure out this word. I'll be right back. Yeah, I was right. Immediate. I don't know why I have a hard time. The immediate course of history will show the development of this union more and more clearly through more and more palpable deeds. And Algeria is also united with the American. In Algeria was once alone. Today is no longer possible. Khrushchev wanted to ignore Vietnam, and he fell. Vietnam is today the center of the global struggle between revolution and counter-revolution. In a certain sense, it is today what Algeria was during the 5th year of the revolution of 1959. But what is different? But what a difference today. The war of Vietnam involves immense power. The Soviet population, the Chinese population follow hour by hour what is happening in Vietnam. And there cannot be the slightest doubt that they are pursuing for intervention. But the American population is following these events too. And although their feelings are not clear and even still terribly confused, one cannot doubt either that the dominant line of pressure, however it may be expressed, is to restrain their own leaders from unleashing a world war. Even in this contradictory form of fears, vacillations, and doubts in the face of the world situation, which did not exist during the war against the Axis powers, the pressure of the world revolution is weighing on the United States. This pressure is building up to produce a more positive response on the part of the student movements, still small but very implicit, opposing American intervention in Vietnam. Never in any country does a significant mass of students represent only themselves. They represent the whole sectors of the population that has not yet decided to express itself. This is valid for the Soviet Union as well as for the United States. Not to be sure, it is not student demonstrations that will decide whether or not a major war will be launched. The balance of forces is immensely more complex, and in the end, the decisive buttons are controlled by only a few persons beyond all control, who may feel compelled to act in the face of a situation they consider desperate for their own survival. The imminent threat that is particular moment, the loss of Vietnam, would bring its wake the loss of all Asia, may be such a situation. But the great value of Fanon's description of the conduct of the masses is the underlining and importance of their inner life, their private discussions, their resistance, their seemingly indirect actions. All of this exists among all the peoples of the world. It is on its deep level that the future, which will later not on seem to burst suddenly and without warning into bloom, is being prepared. The same thing happens in the United States. Resistance to the war of Vietnam, however weak it may seem in comparison with the apparent omnipotence of the imperialist apparatus, must be understood as a highly important symptom of what is gestating in a still unconscious depth of broad segments of the population. The United States is not isolated by any cordon sanitaire from the revolution which is engulfing mankind, and each aggressive step that has governed that its government takes along the road of counter-revolution inevitably weakens opposing forces within the country. It is worth the trouble to analyze the testimony of Fanon because it illustrates how, in the mindset of the worst disaster, the masses find the means to reorganizing themselves and continuing their existence when they have a common objective. Systems cannot do this. Nations fall, armies collapse, businesses close or are expropriated. Colonialists flee. A city is destroyed by bombardment, but the masses go on living. They tenaciously recreate themselves, burying their dead and going forward. It is worth the trouble to analyze Fanon for the life of humanity today, as in Algeria is preparing the life of tomorrow. The desire of collective decisions for social liberation is so rooted in the very life of all mankind that it is as much as a part of their existence as is the earth and the air. There is no power, no conventional or atomic weapon that can destroy it. All the rest may disappear. Nations, enterprises, cities, that's no. This idea is at the bottom of the Chinese strategy against atomic war, and it is also present in the strategy of the Soviet army. One of those chiefs recently referred to the possible war as a popular rise of the masses and described the means being developed or reorganizing the life of the country in case of the atomic attack. It is a fact that the people who went through the Algerian War did not feel intimidated by the atomic menace, nor do the people who are living through the War of Vietnam, nor even do those who, without experiencing actual warfare, live lives which are, quote, a permanent struggle against the omnipresent death. As Fanon says, and it is easy to imagine that if one day the transistor radio of a Bolivian miner, or a Colombian peasant, or an Algerian fella tells them that Moscow and Peking have been destroyed by atomic bombs, they will rise up ferociously, and instantaneously to destroy in turn all that which represents their enemies. And if in the same moment they are also told that on the other side New York has disappeared from the map, their strength will be multiplied, because they will see that their enemies no longer have any support, and they will feel that an immense weight has been lifted from their shoulders. The testimony of Fanon and how much distance has been covered since then should make us reflect that humanity, once it has reached such a degree of decision and collective consciousness, cannot be destroyed by war. Whatever may be the immeasurable damage war can wreak. Perhaps this thesis is not ever very inspiring for the residents of New York, but it was inspiring for the Cubans in 1962 when they faced the imminent prospect of atomic destruction. On the 27th of October, a few people in Havana doubted that the afternoon they would undergo an atomic attack. Few had illusions about their chances. Quote, they're going to wipe us out on the spot. But nobody was afraid or wavered. As it was impressive moving this collective security, Cuba felt herself to be a part of humanity. The entire population felt like the soldier who knows that though the next skirmish will surely cost him his life, he must not flinch, but must help prepare the way for the triumph of his friends. To the end, Cuba was able to take her own destiny in hand, and she won. If in that moment she had vacillated, begged for the truce, or fallen back, she would have lost, been invaded. Thus her decision was part of the strength that made the enemy draw back. Quote, we'd rather have them kill us all than go back to the old life, end quote. This is what the Cuban said. That what the Algerians said in this moment of decision. What the Chinese and the Vietnamese are saying. This very decision makes any threat ineffective, and at the same time unites the destiny of the individuals and the collectivity with that of humankind. The destiny of humankind is today found in revolution. One of those stages is described from within by Fanon in this book. Only by becoming a part of this worldwide revolution can the residents of New York take his human destiny upon his shoulders. Only thus will he find the door to the future, and only thus can his action be effective. Because this action rests not on humanitarian abstractions, but on the real life of human beings today in Algeria, Vietnam, the Congo, China, Indonesia, all of Latin America. When the immense majority of humanity is living through these problems and these experiences, when the real life, the real future of thousands of millions is modeled on this revolutionary life, when humanity is taking its destiny in its hands in this way. It is pure charlatanism to talk of such things as cybernetic revolution. It is human beings, not systems, machines, or weapons who decide their own lives. To ignore this is to isolate a small segment of humanity, the population of the United States, from the life, the problems, and the changes that the immense majority of humanity is experiencing. It is to isolate these segments from the future and from life, and to shut it up inside the provincial and pragmatic narrowness. And it is the people of Algeria and Vietnam, not the Univacs, nor the New York Stock Exchange, who, in the final analysis, decides the future of who, together with the American people, will decide tomorrow what to do with the Univacs and with the vast technology which will belong to them. Zanzibar, in an even more decisive form than Cuba, has demonstrated that today any revolution against imperialism cannot but lead the way to socialism. There is no anti-imperialist revolution in any colonial country that does not mean overthrowing capitalism at the same time. Algeria is another proof. And in this socialist objective, the revolution in the colonies today find the link which joined them to the coming American Revolution. For this reason, any action that unites a segment of the American population, no matter how small it may seem, with the global revolution, represents and introduces in the United States an immense strength, in the same way that the Algerian combatant represented not only the firepower of his gun, but the constant and powerful action of an entire people. This book by Fanon testifies not so much to the death of colonialism as to the life of the masses in this age of revolution. It continues to be today, in the still underdeveloped country, a clarion call to make common causes without reservations or limitations, with those masses to become a part of their struggles, and above all, to feel and understand as their own the tremendous strength of the unity of a united people. This means really to submit oneself to the profanity of the inner life, real not apparent, of one's own people, to understand the signs and symptoms of the immediate future that will come out of those depths, and not out of the superficial remnants of the dead past, which still seems, but only seems, to control the future. In reality, Fanon is calling us all to prepare our place in this revolution that is challenging, transforming, and uniting all of humanity. And this was Alfio Gilli. Postscript. In the small section of the city of Santo Domingo, Dominican people are resisting the military invasion of American troops. Men, women, children, workers, soldiers, students, enclosed in the scant 2 square kilometers, without supplies, without effective outside support from Russia or anybody else, are resisting the greatest military power of the capitalist world. That power cannot advance, although it has the military force to wipe out this zone in less than an hour. Who and what is containing it? What is the force that is animating the Dominicans? The people in these 2 square kilometers are not alone. The entire Dominican population is expressing itself through these armed civilians in these few blocks. But the 3.5 million Dominicans are not alone either. The force of a worldwide revolution, which sustained Algeria and is sustaining Zanzibar, was found on a point of support in the armed population of Santo Domingo. These people, without declaration, without grand gestures, but supplied by resisting with arms in hand, are representing that revolution day by day. they are the greatest symbol of human dignity. Everything that yesterday permitted the Algerians to resist and conquer is today being expressed by Dominican people. And if the Dominican are able to resist in this way, this means that no revolutionary force or tendency, no matter how small it may seem, is alone or isolated. If it knows how to represent, it is in its policies, its acts, and its life. This immense force that is transforming the world. A contrast alone and isolated are those who, with great power and means, wish to break this force or refuse the support of the Dominicans with more than declarations. The Dominican crisis, like the pseudo-Soviets and the Algerian crisis, is indicating in its way that the profound reality of the revolutionary transformation is fighting to express itself openly and to do away with the external appearances perpetuated from the past. The new content is creating cracks in the old forms which are trying to stifle it. Tomorrow, there will be no more arms. Today, arms in the hand of the people changed the deepest recesses of their lives. This introduction was already written when the military junta that governed Bolivia set out to snatch the arms, the radios, the workers' control from the minor workers and the peasants of Bolivia. The junta could advance a strike because the leadership fled at the first heavy attack. But the miners and workers resisted. More than 10 days, they fought with arms in hand and carried out the general strike without centralized leadership and under enormous handicaps. The military junta, assassinating hundreds of people, was able to occupy the mines, take over the unions and the miners' radios because there was no leadership to unite the workers and the popular forces with which together would have been able to rout the junta. But the junta could not and will not be able to reach its essential objectives. The recovery of the arms held by the miners and peasants. The army had advanced, but the arms were hidden. Nobody responded to the invitations to turn over their guns. Without leadership, the defeat was inevitable, and the miners had to retreat. But they were not broken. Proof that the hidden arms. Nobody hides a weapon at the risk of death or the loss of his wages, which in Bolivia is almost the same thing. If it is not in order to continue the resistance, if he is not already by this act alone continued the battle. The militias, the unions, the revolution changed forever the Bolivian people, and this fact no military junta can erase. On the contrary, the permanent dynamism of the worldwide revolution will continue to find support within Bolivia. It will help to regroup forces, as today it is helping the Dominicans to resist and to take the direction indicated by these forces, which is to wipe out the military juntas and its social system and not simply to negotiate with it. For the old leadership politics of the negotiation simply led to disappraisal and flight. A single line unites Santo Domingo's, Vietnam, Bolivia, Algeria. They are expressions of a single revolution that embraces the world. And from the moment when their people succeeded in taking their destinies in their hand by force of arms, nothing and nobody could make them retreat. With difficulty and through crisis, the conflict, like the Sino-Soviet and the Algerian ones, but stubbornly and inexorably, nevertheless, they are making emerge the vanguards and the direction that represents the revolutionary stage of humanity, and they are preparing by their program the methods the advances and the socialist decisions for which humanity is already prepared. All right, before we go on to the preface, does anybody have anything to say? Anybody? Do you have anything to say? I'm guessing no. Is anybody there? Are you guys there? Am I alone? Hello? Hello? Okay, cool. You're here, Lind. I guess you don't have any questions. I guess Joe and Doodley are too busy. I guess I'll move on. I don't know if it was me. I can't tell. Preface. The Algerian War will soon be entering the 6th year. No one among us on November 1954, no one in the world suspects that, there we go, that after, let me find out how long this is. Yeah. All right. I don't know if Lynn, I don't know if they're there. 29. 29. I don't know if anybody's there, Lynn. Do you like my high-pitched voice? Hello. 29. Ooh, 10 pages.
Sorry. I was away from my phone because I had to do something real quick.
Cool. Do you have any questions or comments before we move on to the preface?
I just want to say that, shit. Of course, I forgot what I was going to say as I was going to say it. But,
it happens to me too.
I guess, when it comes to liberation fronts, especially those liberation fronts that involve people with darker than Casper skin, they often get written off even by those with the most forward politics.
Yeah. In the USSR, there was the Soviet split. They mentioned Khrushchev too, so they were already in their reformist stages and revisionist stage there. But like China, always Mao's always coming through, you know. But like this revolution spark other people to do the same thing. This is what I'm also getting too from this. Is that usually when one revolution kicks off, other ones will spark off too. So that's cool. All right, let's see how much we can read. The preface. The Algerian War will soon be entering in its 6th year. No one among us, and in November 1954, no one in the world suspect that after 6 months of fighting, French colonialism will still have released its clutch and heeded the voice of the Algerian people. 5 years of struggle have brought no political change. The French authorities continue to proclaim Algeria to be French. This war was mobilized. The whole population was driven, them to draw upon their entire reserves and their most hidden resources. The Algerian people have given themselves no respite, for the colonialism against which they are pitted has allowed them none. The Algerian War, the most hallucinatory war that any people have ever waged to smash colonial aggression. Its advisories like to claim that the men who lead the Algerian Revolution are impelled by the thirst for blood. The Democrats who were sympathetic to it repeat for their part that it has made mistakes. It has in fact happened that Algerian citizens have violated the directives of the commanding bodies, and that things that should have been avoided had transpired on the national soil. Almost always, incidentally, has these concerns, Algerian citizens. But what has the revolution done in such cases? Has it eluded its responsibility? Has it not penalized those whose acts threatened to compromise the truth of the combat we were waging? Has not Mr. Ferhat Abbas, president of the Council of the GPRA, which is the Government Provisional de la République, which is the provisional government of the Algerian Republic. There you go. Policy announced and sometimes capital measures taken by the leadership of the revolution. And yet, what is the psychologically more understandable than these sudden acts of violence against traitors and war criminals? The men who fought in the first French army campaign had been revolted by the self-appointed dispensers of justice among their fellow soldiers, who shot at collaborators, those who had recaptured the Isle of Elba, who had fought the campaign of Italy and had participated in the landing at Toulon, were outraged by such fratricidal, illegal, and often shameful conducted settling of accounts. Yet we do not remember any convictions of French guerrillas for summary executions proceeding by torturers and unarmed citizens. The National Liberation Front, the NLF, I don't know, at the time when the people were undergoing the most massive assault of colonialism, did not hesitate to prohibit certain forms of action and constantly to remind the fighting units of the international laws of war. In the war of liberation, the colonized people must win, but they must do so cleanly without barbarity, quote unquote. The European nation that practices torture is the blatant nation, unfaithful to its history. The underdeveloped nations that practice torture thereby affirms its nature, plays the role of an undeveloped people. If it does not wish to be morally condemned by the Western nations, an undeveloped nation is obliged to practice fair play, even while its adversaries ventures with a clear conscience into the unlimited exploration of new means of terror. An underdeveloped people must prove by its fighting power, its ability to set up as a nation, and by the purity of every one of its act, that it is even to the smallest detail, the most lucid, the most self-controlled people. But this is all very difficult. Whereas in the region of Mascara, Mascara, exactly 6 months ago, more than 30 combatants circled and having exhausted their ammunition after having fought with rocks, were taken prisoners and executed before the village. The Algerian doctor in another section detached a military mission from the frontier in order to bring back in haste medicine urgently needed to treat the ailment of the French prisoners. In the course of the journey, 2 Algerian fighters were killed. On the other occasion, soldiers have been assigned to engage in diversion maneuvers and to enable a group of prisoners to reach the regional command post unharmed. The French ministers, Lacostia, and these are people, Saltesilia, have published photographs with a view of sullying our cause. Some of these photographs show things done by members of our revolution, but they are other photographs that show some of the thousands of crimes in which the Balanunes and the Harkes, armed by the French army, have themselves been guilty. Now we're going to look up Harkis real quick. I think it's down here. Bellanoni, an FLN leader who went over to the French, the Harkeia, an Arab militiaman in the service of the French. Okay, so it's the service of the French. Finally, and above all, there are those tens of thousands of Algerian men and women who have been and continue to be victims of the French troops. No, it is not true that the revolution has gone to the lengths to which colonialism has gone. But we do not on this account justify the immediate reactions of our compatriots. We understand them, but we can neither excuse them nor reject them, because we want a democratic and a renovated Algeria, because we believe one cannot rise and liberate oneself in one areas and sink to another. We condemn with pain in our hearts those brothers who have flung themselves into revolutionary action with the most almost psychological brutality, and that centuries of oppression gives rise to and feed. The people who condemn us or who blame us for these dark aspects of the revolution know nothing of the terrible problems faced by the chief who must take disciplinary action against patriot guilty. For example, of having killed a notorious traitor, or worse, a woman or a child without having received orders to do so. This man who must be judged in the absence of a code of any law, only by the conscience that each one has of what is allowable and what is forbidden. Many may not be a new man in the combat group. He may have given, or over a period of months, unmistakable proofs of, oh my gosh, abnegation, of patriotism, of courage. Yet, he must be judged. The chief, the local representative of the ruling body, must apply the directives. He must sometimes be the accuser, the other members of the unit having been unwilling to accuse this brother before the revolutionary courts. It is not easy to conduct with a minimum of errors the struggle of a people sorely tried by 130 years of domination against the enemy, as determined and the ferocious of the French colonialism. Mr. Christian, I'm not saying his last name, the Swedish newspaper woman, talked in the camp with some of the thousands of Algerian refugees. Here is an extract of her report, and here it is. The next in the line was a boy of 7, marked by deep wounds made by steel wire, with which he had been bound while French soldiers mistreated and killed his parents and his sisters. A lieutenant had forcibly kept the boy's eyes open so that he would see and remember this for a long time. This child was carried by his grandfather for 5 days and 5 nights before reaching the camp. The child said, quote, "There is only one thing I want, to be able to cut the French soldier up into small pieces, tiny pieces," end quote. Does anyone think it is easy to make this child of 7 forget both the murder of his family and his enormous vengeance? Is this orphaned child growing up in a apocalyptic atmosphere the sole message that French democracy will leave? No one thought that France would defend foot by foot this shameless colonialism for 5 years, a colonialism which is matched on the continent by its homology. I'm gonna look up this word, everybody. Rebecca. It's homolagi. So we're going to figure out what that means here real quick. As soon as I can get it. All right, cool. Using a persona in order to get... Oh my gosh, they did it all in a different language. Jesus Christ. Oh my God. Ugh. Such a hard thing. Sorry, everybody. So much for that, huh? Okay. In South Africa, nor did anyone suspect that the Algerian people would make this place its place in history with such intensity, nor must we delude ourselves. The rising generations are neither more flexible nor more tired than those who launched the struggle. There is, on the contrary, a hardening and determination to be equal to the historical challenge and determination. 2, not to make light of hundreds of thousands of victims, and there is also an exact appraisal of the dimensions of the conflict and of the friendship, of the solidarities, of the interests of and the contradictions of colonialist universe. Having a gun, being a member of the National Army of Liberation, is the only chance that Algerian still has. That chance the Algerian still has of giving a meaning of his death. Life under domination has long been devoid by meaning. Such statements, when they are made by members of the Algerian government, are not the expression of an error of judgment or of a to the bitter end attitude. They are the plain recognition of the truth. There is in Algeria, as an Algerian people see it, an irreversible situation. French colonialism itself has recognized it, and it attempts anarchically to tag along behind the historic movement. In the French National Assembly, 80 Algerian deputies have seats, but today this serves no purpose. The single college has been accepted by the extremists of the domination, but in 1959 this appears ludicrous in view of the extraordinary dimensions assumed by the Algerian national consciousness. Question any woman or any man anywhere on the earth's surface and ask her or him if the Algerian people have not already acquired the right to be 20 times independent. There is no one in 1959, apart from those Frenchmen who have dragged their country into this horrible adventure, who does not yearn to see the end of the slaughter and the birth of the Algerian nation. Nevertheless, there is no end in sight, and we know that the French army is preparing a series of offensive for the coming months. The war goes on. Men are therefore entitled to wonder that are the reason for this obstinacy. Can't say the dang word. One was the duty to understand this enrichment in the war, which was all the earmarks of morbid infatuation. We want to show in this first study that on the Algerian soil, a new society has come to birth. The men and women of Algeria today resemble neither those of 1930 nor those of 1954, nor yet those of 1957. The old Algeria is dead. All the innocent blood that has flown into the national soil has produced a new humanity, and no one must fail to recognize this fact. Having once affirmed that it, quote, would not have hand over to the Arabs 1 million of its sons, France today proclaims that it will never abandon the Sahara and its resources. Such arguments, to be sure, carry no weight with the Algerian. He replies that the richness of a country is not an excuse for oppression or oppressing it. We shall show that the form of and the content of national existence already exists in Algeria, and that there can be no turning back. While in many colonial countries, it is the independence acquired by a party that progressively informs the diffused national consciousness of the people. In Algeria, it is the national consciousness, the collective suffering, the terrors that make it inevitable that the people must take its destiny into its own hands. Algeria is virtually independent. The Algerians already consider themselves sovereign. It remains for France to recognize her. This is obviously of utmost importance, but the real situation is important. It deserves to know. It deserves to be known, for it fundamentally limits the military or political hopes of French colonialism. Why does the French government not put an end to the Algerian war? Why does it refuse to negotiate with the members of the Algerian government? Such are the questions that an honest man in 1959 is entitled to ask. It is not enough to say that colonialism is still powerful in France. It is not sufficient to say that the Sahara has modified the facts of the problem. All this is true, but there is something else. It seems to us that in Algeria, the principal point on which men of goodwill and the French government stumble is the European minority. This is why we have devoted a whole chapter to this question. Algeria is a settler colony. The last settler colony to be talked about was South Africa. The points made are familiar to all. The Algiers Europeans have never quite given up hope of breaking with France and of opposing their iron law on the Algerians. It is the sole consent of the colonialist policy in Algeria. Today, the French army is won over to this idea. The rumors of peace that sprang up here and there must therefore be taken seriously. France will make peace in Algeria by strengthening its domination over Algeria, or by smashing the European feudal interest in Algeria. Apart from these two solutions, peace will have to be imposed upon internationally through the agencies of United Nations or militarily by the Algerian forces. We can see therefore that peace is not for tomorrow. We shall show that France cannot resume its domination in Algeria, even if this domination were to be enlightened or dissimulated. The French government is doomed either to oppose a few hundreds of war criminals or else to give increasing support to the G-side that is rife in Algeria. French authorities do not make us smile when they declare that, quote, the rebellion has a strength of 25,000 men, end quote. What do all these figures amount to when balanced against the holy and colossal energy that keeps a whole people at the boiling point? Even if it is proven that our forces do not exceed 5,000 poorly armed men, what value can such knowledge have since with a million weapons we should still be creating malcontents? Hundreds of thousands of other Algerian men and women would not forgive the leaders for not enrolling them, for leaving them unarmed. What would the Algerian government be if it did not have the people behind it? The French authorities have recently officially recognized the existence of 1 million displaced, regrouped Algerians. They wanted to cut the army off from the people. They wanted, so it appears, to avoid the rottening of Algeria. But how far can one go? The million hostages behind barbed wires and not the French themselves sound the alarm. Medication no longer has any effect on these regrouped people. So great is their psychology deterioration. What then? Colonialism is fighting to strengthen its domination and human and economic exploitation. It is fighting also to maintain the identity of the image it has of the Algerian and the depreciated image of the Algerian had on of himself. Well, this has long since become impossible. The Algerian nation is no longer in a future haven. It is no longer the product of hazy and fantasies ridden imagination. It is at the very center of the new Algerian men. There is a new kind of Algerian men, a new dimension of his existence. The thesis that men change at the same time that they change the world has never been so manifested as it is now in Algeria. This trial of strength not only remodels the consciousness that man has of himself and of his former dominators or the world, at least within his reach. This struggle at different levels renews the symbols, the myths, the beliefs, the emotional responsiveness of the people. We witnessed an Algerian man's reassertion of his capacity to progress. Who can hope to arrest this essential movement? It is not better to open one's eye and see the magnificence, but also the naturalness of this evolution. We are still living in a time when man must fight and die in order to have the right to be the citizen of a nation. And is anything more grotesque and humiliating and obscene than the Appalachians, French Muslims, and the wretchedness and indignity kept alive and nourished every morning? Is this not the sufficient pretext for the most far-fetched crimes? Are there then not enough people on this earth resolved to impose reasons on this unreason? Quote, the possibility of victory over the rebellion can no longer be ruled out. General Chali proclaims, irony here would be out of place. All of the generals and chiefs of all the colonial wars repeat the same thing. But how can they fail to understand that no rebellion ever vanquished? What can it possibly mean to vanquish a rebellion? They tried to vanquish the UPC. I'm going to look down real quick. What is the UPC? Union of Cameroon Population, a party agitating for independence. And then there will be next the FLN, the National Liberation Front. Okay, we'll go back up. Where is it at? We're almost done. We're almost to a stopping point. Okay, here it is. But did not the Cameroons win their independence? The only difference is that colonialism, before it left, sowed half-treason, provocations, rancors, and profusion among the Cameroonian people. As a result, the future of the Cameroons is jeopardized for several years to come by the evil and outwardly subtle policies. We want to show in these pages that colonialism has definitely lost out in Algeria, while the Algerians, come what may, have definitely won. These people which was lost to history once again finds a flag, a government already recognized by many states, and it can no longer draw back. This illiterate people that is writing the finest and the most stirring pages of the struggle for freedom cannot draw back nor be silent. French colonialism must know these things. It can no longer hide from itself. The fact that the Algerian government can mobilize any Algerian at any time, even the winners in the last election foreseeably registered on the administration electoral list, would resign in order to do so by the FLN. Not even the deputies of the 13th of May can long resist the new national authority. What then? An army can at any time reconquer the ground lost. But how can the inferiority complex, the fear, and the disappear of the past be re-implemented in the consciousness of the people? How can one imagine, as General de Gaulle ingeniously invented them to do, that the Algerians will, quote, go back to their homes? What meaning can this expression have for the Algerian today? Colonialism shuts its eyes to the real facts of the problem. It imagines that our power is measured by the number of our heavy machine guns. This is true in the first month of 1955. It is no longer true today. First of all, because other elements have their weight in the scales of history. Next, because machine guns and cannons are no longer the weapon of the colonialists alone. 2/3 of the world's population is ready to give to the revolution as many heavy machine guns as we need. And if the other third does not do so, it is by no means because it is out of sympathy with the cause of the Algerian people. Quite the contrary. This other third misses no opportunity to make it known that this cause has its unqualified moral support, and it finds ways of expressing this concretely. The power of the Algerian Revolution, I'm going to try and finish it up. The power of the Algerian Revolution henceforth resides in the radical mutation that the Algerian has undergone. General de Gaulle, addressing himself to Algerians extremists, recently declared that Papa's Algeria is dead. That is quite true, but it is not the whole truth. Big Brother's Algeria is dead too. There is a new Algeria, an Algerian nation, and Algerian government. These obvious facts will sooner or later have to be recognized. We shall see that in these pages that transformation the consciousness of the Algerian has undergone. We shall see the fissures that as they have grown have been the hard bangers of Algerians' new European society. What are we really witnessing is the slow but sure agony of the settler mentality. The new relations are not the result of one barbarism replacing another barbarism, of one crushing of man replacing another crushing man. What we Algerians want to discover, the man building behind the colonizer, this man who is both the organizer and the victim of a system that has choked him and reduced him to silence. As for us, we have long since rehabilitated the Algerian colonized man. We have wrenched the Algerian man from the centuries old of implacable oppression. We have risen to our feet and we are now moving forward. Who can settle us back into servitude? We want an Algerian open to all, in which every kind of genius may grow. This is what we want, and this is what we shall achieve. We do not believe there exists anywhere a force capable of standing in our way. 1959, Frantz Fanon. And then tomorrow we will start chapter 1, Algeria Unveiled. And that is page 41 in the book. In there, yeah. Let me do this. Let me do this. Oh my gosh! It's gonna let me set a prayer. Come on. Of course. There is no putting a fucking add a bookmark. There it is. I found it. Let's make sure. Let's see here. And 41. All right, it's open. Anybody have any things to say?
I really don't have much to say right now because I've been very split. I've been listening in, but I'm also having to do some other stuff. I apologize.
It's okay. It's all right. Huh? It's okay. We're just getting started in this book. You know what I mean? We're gonna find out a lot in this book. We're gonna find out what the reason why the radio is so important. We're gonna figure out the transformation of an Algerian person, Algerian woman, of the family and everything. We're gonna go through all this transformation from people that are like completely oppressed to the people that fight against oppression, and transforming from them into spontaneity, into a organized group that seeks a liberation process. So we're going to see this. We're going to see the transformations of peoples and human development and of organization development in Algeria. So it's going to be very fun. Joe, I think I'm going to find out if Joe's asleep. Let me go find out. Be right back, everybody. Alexa, turn off the light. Yes, Joe is asleep, everybody. Joe is asleep. So, real quick, what's your first impression, dude? Are you enjoying it so far? I know you read it before. Anything? I know you don't have to. You don't have to tell me or anything. Anything new that came up that you're going to reflect on and take in? Because I know there's some stuff that was newly reflected on me too.
The only new thing really is how much I'm going, God damn it, I just want to hear this book. What now? But other than that, nothing new.
Okay, good. Does anybody have any questions in the comments? I'll leave it up to the comments for a little bit, and then if not, I'll go ahead and close it off, and we'll start tomorrow with chapter 1.